Good morning. Okay. Hey, lots to talk about today. I think yeah, there was. I went to see the new Disney movie last night, Aladdin. I'm going to talk. I have. I'm still trying to figure out what I thought of the film, but I'll talk about it at the end. But first, I want to talk about two other films that are opening in Hong Kong. Opened in Hong Kong yesterday. I keep forgetting today's Friday because I'm so used to broadcasting. When I was on the radio, I broadcasted on Thursday, so I still have Thursday in my mind. But today's Friday, and movies open here on Thursdays. That was always a pain for me when I did the reviews because especially for Disney films, they don't let us see the films until the day they're released. In places like Los Angeles, whatever, the critics get to see the films a week or two or whatever beforehand. We don't here. Some of the films we do, but Disney, definitely not. Disney, we only see them the day of. Marvel, we see the day of. And it was always difficult because I would have to go on the radio and say, I haven't seen the film. I'm seeing it later tonight. So now that I'm on Friday, I can talk about the film. Although I still have to think about what I want to say about it. Anyhow, I'll talk about two other films that opened yesterday in Hong Kong. The first is Greta. And Greta is directed by Oscar winner Neil Jordan, who did The Crying Game way back. I think that was 1992. If you haven't seen The Crying Game, that really, I wonder, you know what, I haven't seen it since 1992, and I wonder if it still holds up. The big thing about The Crying Game was the surprise, and I won't say, in case you haven't seen it, I won't say what the surprise was, but I remember I saw it here in Hong Kong. Also, maybe, yeah, because I was living in Taiwan at the time, so I came to Hong Kong for the weekend, and I did see it. So it might have been 92, 93, I can't remember. And I knew about the surprise, but the fellow who was sitting next to me in the cinema didn't. And when it happened, he was like, "Oh my God!" That was quite good, but it was still very good. So anyhow, Neil Jordan did The Crying Game. He's done a couple other films since then, but none has really brought him the success that The Crying Game has done. So now he's back with the film Greta, and it stars the always amazing Isabelle Huppert, French actress. She a couple of years ago she was in the film Elle, for which she was nominated for an Oscar. Didn't win. I can't remember who won that year, but not her. But she has won other major film festival awards, and she is a tremendous actress. Also stars Grace Chloe Moretz, who young actress who has been in a lot of different films lately. She was in the new Suspiria film. She was in The Miseducation of Cameron Post, The Clouds of Sils Maria. I think, like some of these other young actors and actresses like Robert Pattinson, and who's going to be the new Batman apparently, and what's her face, Kristen, I don't know, she was in Clouds of Sils Maria as well. I think they're doing the right thing. They're working with different directors. They're not going into these big blockbuster films. They're doing these really good, interesting art house films, and I think it's good for her career. She's not going to be a household name by doing it, or maybe she is, but I think she'll be respected, and she's learning some good things along the way. One sec. Also, the perils of doing this early in the morning. Need to warm up the vocal cords. Anyhow, the story involves Frances McCullen, who's Moretz's character. She's a young woman living in New York. She's originally from Boston. She's a recent university grad, works at an upscale New York bistro as a waitress, and she shares a flat with her best friend Erica, who was played by Micah Monroe, who was the star of It Follows. Wasn't my favorite film by any means, but nice to see her in something else, and I think she does a good job here. And the issue involves a handbag that Frances, that's Moretz's character, finds on a subway train. And which is, she picks it up and she tries to find the owner. Now, very interestingly, here in Hong Kong, where we take public transit by and large, and people accidentally leave their mobile phones and wallets, and sometimes children. This is a true story. Some friends, people that I don't want to say they're friends of mine, people that I knew the wife accidentally left her child in the back of a taxi. Not for very long, mind you, but she did. So, people leave things on the trains on a daily basis or in the back of taxis. And most of us here in Hong Kong do make an effort to try to return the item to its owner, or perhaps get the police involved in the case of children. I know I've returned mobile phones to people. New York, different, So, but she's from Boston, and she says in Boston people do this sort of thing. So she returns this classy handbag to the owner, and the owner's name is Greta Hideg, played by Hubert, and she's a French widow who lives in a quaint Brooklyn townhouse. Now, Greta is thrilled to get the bag, to get the bag back and all of its contents back, and she's grateful to the young woman. So as the two women get to know each other a little better, Greta learns that Frances recently lost her mother and still misses her terribly. Well, Frances learns that Greta's daughter, Nicole, who's about her age, has gone off to France to study music, and the mother's all alone in the big city. So they find some common ground, and they begin a friendship against the advice of the best friend, Erica, who finds it a little bit creepy that Frances is making friends with this older woman, that she barely knows. Now, this friendship comes to a screeching halt when Frances realizes that perhaps Erica was right. Greta isn't the person she pretends to be. However, Greta won't let her new friend run away so quickly. Now, for the most part, that's all I'm going to say about the film. For the most part, Greta follows a fairly worn path that better films like Single White Female and Fatal Attraction have blazed before. It's not all that different, and the other films do it better. But this film has some pretty good twists and turns in the second and the third acts that you go, hey, yeah, well done. There's a dream sequence. I won't say what it is, but there's a dream sequence that will leave you unsure of what's real and what's imagined for a few minutes at any rate. You do say, oh, okay, I got it. But when I was watching, I was going, oh. So I thought that was really well done. And for me, the best thing about this film is Hubert. She's wonderful. She plays this character on the campy side, and really well and nicely done too. The only problem I had though with it was really the way that her character was written, is she goes from this sweet middle-aged piano teacher to creepy stalker to full-on crazy lady rather quickly. I would have preferred to have a little bit more exposition in there than the way it just was bang, bang, bang. And, it didn't quite work as well as it could have or should have, in my opinion. Now, I'd say for the other women, Moretz and Monroe, I think they do a good job for what they're given. They're not given a lot. This is really all about Hubert. And, as much as I did like the performances of the women, there's a few men in this film, notably Colm Fiore from TV's House of Cards. I think he's Canadian. And he plays her father, Frances's father. And there's Jordan alumnus Stephen Rea, who was in The Crying Game. He has a small part here as a private detective. And I'm not going to give too much away here. When he shows up on screen, he's not long for this world. And I thought for both these men, their characters were really, they were underdeveloped, which was rather unfortunate. Now, and I think, Frances, for her part, she seems too naive for 2018 New York. Now, she's supposed to be naive. She's from, although Boston is not exactly a small town. She was from, somewhere in Iowa, you'd say, okay, she's entitled to be naive. But she's from Boston, it's a big city. It's a modern, current city. But she's very naive. There's a few things in the script that you think, come on, this just doesn't ring true. Frances starts calling her mobile phone. Why doesn't she just block her, Or she starts calling her landline. Who has a landline? I haven't had a landline in 10 years. And why these two young women who, they both have mobile phones, why they need a landline is anybody's guess. So, again, disconnect the landline. I don't get it. Or when things really, when Greta really starts going crazy and the father gets involved, go to the police. You know, like Greta, Frances went to the police when Greta started going a little loopy. So the police are already aware of Greta. Go back to the police. you know. So there were a few plot holes, let's say, that just didn't make it. Um, and then at the end, when Greta goes really, off the deep end, and starts getting really campy, I'm thinking, is the director trying to make a campy thriller? I'm not sure, Even now, I'm not sure what he was trying to do. Was he trying to do a serious thriller or a campy thriller? I'm not sure. He ended up with a campy thriller. It had its moments, but I don't know. So, you know what? I think it wasn't a horrible film. It's actually not a bad film because of Huppert, but the problem is the writing. The writing was not good. I was going to say bad. The writing was not good, and it could have been better. So I would say check it out. The film's called Greta. Check it out because of Huppert's performance. Don't go in with high expectations and you won't be disappointed. So not a horrible film, not a great film either. So that's Greta. Second film that opened yesterday in Hong Kong is the commercial release of Peter Jackson's war documentary, World War I documentary, They Shall Not Grow Old. I reviewed this film when it first came out. It was released, if I can remember correctly, last November to coincide with the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. And it was released on the BBC. And it's probably still available on BBC Online. I don't know. And so I did review it back then. And at the time, I had contacted Warner Brothers, who was the distributor, and I said, is it coming to Hong Kong? And they said they didn't know. Now it's here. So finally it's here. And I have to say, you do have to see this film. And, you can probably, as I say, you can probably still see it on BBC Online or, different other streaming services I'm not aware of. But I think it's good to see it in the cinema because it really is an excellent documentary. He's taken archival silent footage and audio recordings of the soldiers who fought in World War I, or the Great War as it was called, and they survived. And he created a visual masterpiece that will not only educate people for years to come, it'll be the gold standard for historical film restoration and presentation. And I'm one of these kids or was one of these kids who grew up watching these old films in history class, and these black and white films that were this big in history class with these grainy images and blurred faces and people walking too fast for normally too abnormally too fast. It was boring, and I don't know what kids see these days, but that was boring. And to me, there was no connection. And you know what amazes me still to this day is I was born not long after the end of World War II. Not a year or two, but not terribly long after the end of World War II. But yet, to me, World War II was ancient history. So World War I is really ancient history. And so there was no connection between me and the people I saw on the screen. There was no intimacy. And what Jackson has done is he's created a film that's intimate. That it's amazing because he took more than 600 hours of footage from England's Imperial War Museum, and he cleaned up the noise, all the scratches and the bleeps and the blips, and he adjusted the speed because much of that film was shot at a rate of 13 frames per second. Today we see films at 24 frames per second. I mean, there have been frames at more than Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk was, I think, 40 frames per second if I remember correctly. But generally it's 24 frames per second. So what was happening was these films were shot at 13 frames per second. They were being shown at 24 frames per second, which is why people were seeming to walk fast. So what he did was he adjusted the timing so that now they're walking at a normal speed. So I thought that was really well done. And he colorized the images. And so for the first time we see their faces. Their faces are very clear, and we see they had bad teeth. And that's not so much of a state of their lack of dental hygiene, but their socioeconomic status. These were mostly poor kids who went into the army back then. So that was very, very interesting. And then what he did was he employed lip readers and voice actors to put some voice to what these soldiers were saying and thinking. So in cases where the lip readers, we're now actually hearing what these people are saying, and he's doing voiceovers of testimony. He had all this testimony that the Imperial War Museum had collected, and so we're hearing testimony of survivors of the battles on the Western Front, where an estimated 4 million soldiers were killed. And so now we sort of get into these soldiers' heads, and just absolutely amazing, And so it's beautiful 35 millimeter color, Dolby Atmos sound. It's really a masterpiece in filmmaking, in film restoration. So you know what? I think this is a tremendous film. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, and as I said, it opened yesterday in Hong Kong in the cinemas. God knows how long it's going to be here for, because I don't know how commercially popular this is going to be compared to the next film I'm going to talk about. But certainly highly, highly, highly recommended. I hope he gets nominated for an Oscar or a special Oscar or something like that for this film, because this really was a masterpiece in film restoration. I think I said that already, but it's worth saying a second time. So that's called They Shall Not Grow Old. Now, the big film that opened yesterday is Aladdin, the live action adaptation of the 1992 animated film that featured the voice of Robin Williams as the Blue Genie, and the Broadway play, the stage play that happened later on. So now we have the live action film. This is what Disney's been doing ever since 101 Dalmatians came out, which was 1991 or something. 1991 or something. This year we had last year was Beauty and the Beast. We had Dumbo a few weeks ago. We have Maleficent. The sequel is coming out in a couple weeks. And then in July, excuse me, I think The Lion King is coming out. So what Disney is doing is they're mining their vast catalog of animated films, and they're giving them the live action adaptation treatment. Generally, these films have not been terribly successful critically, but they have been successful financially. So, I believe they've all made more than their money back. So Disney keeps pumping them out, even though critics and audiences are going, yeah, it's okay. I think, what was the one last year, 2 years ago? The Jungle Book. I thought The Jungle Book was pretty good. It wasn't a great film, but it was a pretty good film. That was, I think, probably the most highly rated of all these adaptations. Beauty and the Beast was rated fairly good, but most of the other ones are like, yeah, okay. But they're making money for Disney, so they're going to keep doing it. And there's many, many more of these films coming. Mm-hmm. So here we have Aladdin, directed by Guy Ritchie and starring Will Smith as the Blue Genie. Now, back in February, the first trailer came out for the film. We see Will as this Blue Genie, and audiences, fans of the Robin Williams animated version reacted big time. They did not like it at all. They thought he was too blue, and they complained, and of course Ritchie then had to go back and make him less blue, and tweak it a little bit, and now we have it. This film, it had huge it had a huge mountain to climb because of Robin Williams. You know, the animated feature was written for Robin Williams, and he riffed, you know, most of the lines. He apparently recorded some like 30 hours of his of doing these riffs, and they took the best of the 30 hours and turned this into, you know, his script. So how do you compete with that? You just can't. And I think wisely, Guy Ritchie and Will Smith, they say, okay, we can't compete against it, so let's try to do something different. Unfortunately, they don't do different enough. It's not different enough. I found that the story is mostly similar to the 1993 film. It has been updated a little bit. We have a new character. There's a new character in the film. I won't say who. We have Jasmine, the princess. She's more of a, let's say, a modern woman. Let's say, because now I don't want to say, but she has, she's not content to just be the princess anymore. So she's got, there's a little bit of a modern take to her. We have Jafar, who's the bad guy in the film. He's got a wider role. Some people who've seen the film don't like the what happened to his character. It was okay. I wasn't upset with it. And then, of course, because you have CGI, you have Will Smith, who changes from being, he's this genie, and then he's changing a little bit. I really don't want to reveal anything. I don't want to ruin it for anybody. And he's changing back and forth, and various things happen because of CGI. So I would have liked. It was a very tough line these guys had to walk, because you don't want to stray too far from the original, but you do want to create your own path. And I felt that by and large, they on the whole, let's just say, on the whole, I think they were successful. This is an enjoyable film. It's just not a great film. It's like, it's like all these other Disney films. It's not great. It's good. It's okay. And because I think you had such an iconic performance in Robin Williams, it's like overshadowing this. As I was watching this film, I was saying to myself, imagine if Robin Williams, that film was never made, and we just had this. How would this stand up? And I say, okay, it's a good film. It's not a great film. And unfortunately, you know what? I would have liked to have enjoyed it more. I felt that there were times that it really did soar, and I'm not using the magic carpet metaphor, or a whole new world. But, at times the film really did soar, and then other times it just came clunking down to earth. And I found most of those times involved Will Smith. Maybe I'm just not a Will Smith fan. I don't know. To me, I thought he was the weakest part of the film. It does start. There's quite a few new faces. There's Aladdin is played by Egyptian Canadian actor Mena Massoud. I think this is his first film. I thought he did a good job. We have Jasmine, played by Naomi Scott, who's British, Indian. I think her mother was born in Uganda, of Indian descent. Father's British. I thought she was great. I mean, she's done quite a few Disney productions. I've never seen her before. Jafar was played by Marwan Kanzari, who I understand is Tunisian, and the Sultan is played by Naveed Negahban, who many people would remember if you've seen the TV show Homeland. He was this big Al-Qaeda operative. He was supposed to be the Jordanian, in real life, the Jordanian guy who I think is still alive. I'm not sure. But he always is wonderful. So, what I thought the performances were generally good. It just wasn't uplifting. It just wasn't uplifting. And it's a shame, because you have this beautiful music written by Alan Menken, and there's some new songs by Benj Pasek and Justin Paul. These are the guys behind La La Land. So the music is fabulous. It just didn't uplift me as much as I would have hoped to. So that's my take on the film. You know what? Go see it. You know what? And try not to compare it to the original Aladdin, and then see what you think of it. I think you're going to have a hard time not comparing it, but it was okay. It was okay. It was better than okay. It was better than okay. You know, not great though. So, and it wasn't a disaster. Let's put it that way. It is not a disaster, as many people, myself included, thought it was going to be. So yeah, that's it. That's it. So that's it for this week. Next week is the new Godzilla movie, and yeah, that's I think that's the only movie opening next week is the new Godzilla movie. So have a good week and a good weekend. See ya.